In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 college basketball games happening on January 3rd, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start: if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Kentucky versus Alabama. Tuscaloosa on a Saturday in early January is a fun place for a stress test. You have a Kentucky group trying to prove it is more than a hot December stretch, walking into a building full of people who are very sure their team belongs in every Final Four conversation already. The number on this one has Alabama laying a small handful of points at home, and that spread basically asks a simple question: do you trust Kentucky's still settling identity in its very first true SEC road game under a new staff, or the team that already knows exactly what it is and has been running that script on repeat in this building? Alabama's personality is not subtle. They play fast, stretch the floor all the way to the parking lot, and treat the three-point line like a suggestion to shoot early and often. Game flow with them is simple to read. If they are even reasonably accurate from outside, you glance up at the scoreboard and see 90+ again, and it feels like the game flipped in about 4 real minutes. The point here is not just that they score, it is how much pressure their tempo and spacing put on a defense that is 1 or 2 steps late. Kentucky's defense is far more comfortable against teams that run cleaner, more traditional stuff. Give them a steady diet of post touches, mid-range pull-ups, and predictable half-court actions, and they can sit in a stance, load up help, and use their length to shrink the floor. This matchup is the opposite of that comfort zone. Here they are chasing 5 shooters, navigating ball screens higher on the floor, and trying to finish possessions against a team that crashes hard when shots go up. That is exactly where their known trouble spots, the defensive glass and late closeouts, tend to be exposed over and over again. Even local chatter around Kentucky has circled back to rebounding and perimeter discipline as the things that keep showing up whenever games get sticky. That matters here because Alabama is not just firing away for style points, they are combining that volume from deep with a solid shot at second chances. When you give a high-octane home offense 2 or 3 looks at a possession, the math starts tilting toward a margin instead of a coin flip. You do not need them to be perfect for 40 minutes. You just need 2 or 3 of those patented runs where a 6-point game very quietly becomes a double-digit cushion. Layer on the environment and the numbers behind the matchup, and the spread starts to make more sense. Analytic models that focus on efficiency and tempo largely agree that Alabama should be ahead by a couple of possessions on average, which is right in the neighborhood of this line. Win probability tools lean their way too, which usually nudges the market a little more toward the home favorite and dares you to step in front of that scoring machine in its own gym. Honestly, if you picture how this game looks in the final 4 or 5 minutes, the scenario that keeps popping up is Alabama playing from in front and Kentucky needing to chase. That late-game script, with fouls and forced shots, tends to help a favorite land on the right side of a manageable number rather than sweating a 1-point result. As our first pick for this matchup, the Alabama Crimson Tide to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Books hanging a total number up in the low 170s for a college game are basically asking if you are brave enough to bet against chaos. You see a total that high, and your first instinct is that has to be inflated, right? Then you remember who is involved here, and it suddenly feels a lot less crazy. Alabama plays like it has a plane to catch and points to score before it boards. They crank the pace, fling up threes in absurd volume, and are perfectly happy trading possessions as long as you let them keep the throttle open. They have already put triple digits on the board several times this season, which is not some random one-off heater. It is their core identity showing up when the shots fall. Combine that with their tendency to give up plenty on the other end, and you get game scripts where both sides can live in the 80s or better if things stay clean. Kentucky is not some grinded-out throwback in this equation either. Their offensive profile fits nicely into a game that wants to go fast, with enough shooting and playmaking to keep up when the tempo climbs. Defensively, they are solid on paper, but this specific opponent drags you into a style where stops do not last very long if you cannot build a wall in transition and finish possessions with rebounds. So even when Kentucky gets the initial stop, if Alabama is back on the line for another 3 or turning a long rebound into instant offense the other way, the scoreboard keeps twitching upward. Here is the thing that really leans you toward a higher score. Neither of these teams is particularly generous with live ball turnovers. They generally sit around that neat 10 per game type territory, which means you get more shots and fewer possessions wasted by throwing the ball into the third row. More shots plus this tempo plus this shot selection, a big chunk of threes and rim attempts, is a recipe for stretch totals, especially once you add late-game fouling if the margin is within shouting distance. On top of that, the predictive models that spit out projected scores for this exact matchup are all singing roughly the same tune. You see simulations in the high 80s to low 90s for Alabama and low 80s for Kentucky, which cluster pleasingly around the kind of number the books are posting. That does not guarantee anything, of course, but when independent systems that weight pace, efficiency, and recent form all land in the same high-scoring neighborhood, it is usually a sign the total is high for a reason rather than pure shock value. Could this still land under? Sure, if Kentucky absolutely owns the glass, if Alabama has one of its rare cold nights from 3, or if the officials decide to let a lot of contact go and the game bogs down into half-court wrestling, you can find a path where the final score lives in the mid-160s instead. But when you zoom out and think about the most common version of this game, it looks a lot more like a track meet than a rock fight. Two talented offenses, one defense that is still very much a work in progress, a ton of possessions, and a national audience on a weekend afternoon all lean toward fireworks. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Oklahoma State versus Texas Tech. You look at this matchup and it just feels like classic Big 12 chaos waiting to happen, only this time the chaos is tilted toward the home team in a pretty specific way. Texas Tech comes in at 10-3, sitting comfortably in that national mid-teen ranking tier, and more importantly, they have not taken a loss yet in Lubbock this season. 7 straight home wins, big crowds, and a program that has gotten very comfortable living with expectations. That all matters when the calendar flips to league play. On the other side, Oklahoma State's 12-1 mark looks shiny on paper, and it should, but the context is hard to ignore. They have not played a single true road game yet. Everything has been in Stillwater or on neutral floors, so this trip is their first real taste of walking into a hostile conference gym with students back, banners hanging, and nothing familiar around them. That is a very different ask than showing up in a ballroom or a bye game where half the crowd is on their phones. Here is the thing, stylistically these two teams are almost perfect foils. Oklahoma State wants this to feel like a track meet. They are comfortable living in the high 80s and low 90s, and their whole personality leans into the idea that they can simply keep stacking points until the other team taps out. We have already seen what happens when that identity gets tested against real high major resistance. That neutral site loss to Oklahoma snapped their perfect start and showed how fragile it can be when the talent across from them is not overwhelmed by the pace. Texas Tech, by comparison, feels a lot more stable. They are scoring right around 83.8 points per game and winning by double digits on average, which tells you they are not just getting into shootouts, they are controlling them. They value the ball, they have a positive turnover margin, and they squeeze extra chances on the glass, so even when they miss, the possession is not automatically over. That kind of profile travels pretty well, but it looks especially nasty at home where everything from the depth perception to the rims already belongs to them. When you marry that style edge with the situational spot, the number hanging at the book starts to make a lot more sense. Market-wide, Texas Tech is sitting in that double-digit favorite pocket, roughly the 10.5 to 11.5 range depending on where you shop, and that is not just random inflation. You have a proven top 15 level team with a perfect home record hosting a group that has yet to prove it can be the same version of itself outside its own building. Stack on the historical piece too. Oklahoma State has dropped 4 of the last 5 in this series and is 1-10 straight up in its last 11 road games overall, so the road track record is not exactly screaming live underdog. Honestly, it is always a little uncomfortable to endorse laying that many points in a conference opener because weird shooting nights and nerves are part of the league DNA. There is a universe where Oklahoma State's scoring pops early, they bank in a couple of threes, and suddenly the live number gets tight. But if you zoom out and trust the bigger picture, the more balanced team, the one that has already been stress tested against ranked competition and has a true fortress at home, is far more likely to stretch this out rather than sweat it in the final minute. Over 40 minutes, the profile, the trends, and the building itself all tilt toward a comfortable gap on the scoreboard, not a coin flip at the horn. As our first pick for this matchup, the Texas Tech Red Raiders to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Odds makers have already cranked this total number up into the high 160s, hovering right around that 168.5 neighborhood, which is their not-so-subtle way of saying, expect a track meet, not a grind. You do not see totals up here by accident. The math on both sides almost begs for it. Oklahoma State is living in the low 90s on the scoreboard, giving you about 91.2 points per game while allowing roughly 78.3. That is a wild scoring profile. It means their average night is already flirting with 170 combined points before you even layer in opponent style. They do not exactly smother people, they just try to outscore them, and that shows up in how often their games turn into races rather than half-court arm wrestles. Texas Tech is not far behind in terms of firepower. They are putting up that 83.8 per game clip while giving up just over 73, so their average contest lands in the mid-150s even before you add a tempo boost from an opponent that wants to run. At home, they tend to lean into the crowd energy. You get those quick 6-point bursts, transition threes, and those little runs where the arena gets loud and the game feels like it is speeding up even if the clock says otherwise. Here is where it gets fun. The trend sheet is basically screaming points without you even having to squint. Oklahoma State has seen the total go over in 9 of its last 10, which fits perfectly with a team that treats defense as just enough rather than a calling card. And when these programs get together in Lubbock, history has not exactly been kind to unders. The over has cashed in 7 of the last 8 meetings there, which tells you that style and setting tend to combine into fireworks more often than not. If you picture how this specific matchup wants to play out, you can see why the total climbed into this rare air. Oklahoma State is not showing up in its first true road game looking to walk the ball up and win something like 65-62. They are going to push, they are going to hunt early offense, and they almost have to, but because that is the identity that got them to 12 wins in 13 tries. Texas Tech, for their part, has enough offensive juice and enough confidence at home that they are unlikely to slam on the brakes as long as they are comfortable with the cushion. In a weird way, both teams kind of drag each other toward a faster game. If Oklahoma State falls behind, they speed things up to try to claw back, which adds extra possessions and more late clock fouling if the margin is in that annoying 8 to 12 point zone. If Oklahoma State shoots well early and keeps this close, Texas Tech has every reason to keep their foot on the gas to avoid getting caught in a late-game coin flip. Either game script, close or stretched, leans toward multiple players in double figures and both sides living up near or above their season scoring averages. So while a total in the upper 160s can feel intimidating at first glance, the matchup, the tempos, and the recent patterns all point in the same direction. This is far more likely to look like a Big 12 track meet than a grinded-out rock fight, and the number is set high for a reason, not as a trap. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. North Carolina versus SMU. You look at this matchup and it feels a bit like a blue blood walking into a house party that has already been going all night and is just now realizing it. North Carolina is sitting at 13-1, feeling comfortable, ranked, and used to being the headline everywhere they go. SMU, though, is that new kid in the Atlantic Coast Conference who has quietly stacked an 11-2 record and has turned Moody Coliseum into something closer to a pressure cooker than a gym, with a perfect 9-0 mark at home so far. That is not just nice marketing copy, it is the kind of environment where every missed box out or lazy closeout suddenly feels twice as loud and twice as heavy on the road team's legs. Here is the thing. On paper, the Tar Heels check almost every traditional box people lean on when they lay a short road favorite. They defend at a borderline elite level, holding opponents to just 63.7 points per game. They sit near the very top of the country in field goal percentage defense at 36.1%, and they have not allowed anyone to crack 74 points all season. You do not stumble into those numbers by accident. That is structure, discipline, and a coaching staff that clearly trusts its system. So you can see why casual bettors glance at the screen, see a small minus next to North Carolina's name, and think, yeah, that looks safe. But if you stop there, you miss the tension that actually makes this spread interesting. SMU does not play the role of polite underdog. They come in leading the Atlantic Coast Conference in fast break points, right around 16.5 a night, and they are sitting at about 91.1 points per game and just shy of 50% from the field. That is a team that runs, shares, and scores, and when you give that kind of offense a home crowd that has not seen them lose yet, the court does not feel neutral at all. It feels tilted. North Carolina's defense wants everything in the half court, controlled, predictable. SMU's offense wants your mistakes, your lazy transition defense, your we will be fine, we are the ranked team, possessions, and they turn those into layups and inside-out threes. You add in the context. This is North Carolina's first Atlantic Coast Conference road game of the season, and it comes against a team that is sitting 29th in the NCAA with 5 different double-digit scores and a ton of confidence. SMU already saw this jersey last season in Chapel Hill, took the punch, and watched North Carolina win that 182-67. Now the rematch happens in a building where SMU has already hung a 110-63 win on Cal State Fullerton and has been flirting with triple-doubles and blowout margins like it is a normal Tuesday. There is a real emotional edge here, almost a "you took us lightly last year, try that again in our building" type spot. Honestly, this spread almost dares you to auto-click the road favorite. A 1.5 on a ranked heavyweight looks small, maybe even generous, but everything about the setup, from SMU's home strength to their ability to score in waves, suggests that this number is more about brand names than about what has actually happened on the floor so far. And when a line seems to lean more on reputation than reality, that is usually where the value lives on the other side. As our first pick for this matchup, the SMU Mustangs to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. You see a total number posted in the low 150s. You see SMU averaging 91.1 points per game and playing track meet basketball, and your brain almost instinctively pictures a 78-75 type finish where nobody gets many stops. It looks like fireworks or bust on the surface. That is exactly how a high total hooks you. But here is the thing. Totals are not just about how many points a team can score when things are going well. They are about how both teams behave when the game gets serious. North Carolina's defense is not pretending here. It owns the numbers, holding every opponent below 75, giving up only 63.7 a night, and forcing teams into 36.1% shooting is not the profile of a group that happily participates in a pure shootout. They can play fast in stretches, sure, but the backbone is still guard the rim, contest the perimeter, and make you work through possessions. And when your identity is built that way, especially in road conference games, your instinct is to slow the temperature of the game whenever it starts to boil. SMU, on the other side, is almost the mirror image on offense. They push the pace, they excel in transition, and they are comfortable playing games where the scoreboard barely has time to catch up. If you only looked at their scores, especially those recent ones where totals have flown past the number, you might think, well, if SMU drags North Carolina into their style, this thing flies over. That is the emotional hook. Fast team plus high number equals points, right? But watch how these styles intersect. North Carolina's defense is actually built to handle a team like this, at least conceptually. They limit easy fast break chances, giving up just 5.9 fast break points per game, and they have already faced high-level offenses on neutral and road courts without letting the game completely turn into a scoring festival. Add in that this is their first Atlantic Coast Conference road spot, in a loud building, and you can easily imagine the coaching message. Value possessions, defend without fouling, do not turn this into a track meet. That kind of mindset, even if both teams are efficient, quietly shaves possessions off the game. There is also a little betting psychology at work here. You have a high-flying SMU offense at home, a big brand opponent, and a total sitting around 151.5. Public eyes see SMU's recent overstreaks and North Carolina's offensive bursts in some non-conference wins and think points, points, points. But the more people lean into that storyline, the more this number starts to creep into a range where the bar for an over gets uncomfortably high against a defense that has not allowed anyone past 74 all season. All it takes is one slightly tight whistle, a few more half-court possessions, or a couple of empty crunch time trips, and that kind of total becomes heavy. So while it is tempting to imagine a full-on scoring showcase, the mix of North Carolina's proven defense, their ability to drag tempo back to something manageable, and the natural jitters of a marquee Atlantic Coast Conference game in a new building all point toward a game that plays a little more controlled than the number suggests. Points will come. There is too much talent on the floor for them not to, but asking these two to blow the roof off a total that high means you are fading the one thing that has been consistently reliable all season: North Carolina's ability to put a lid on games. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Tennessee versus Arkansas. Bud Walton on a January Saturday feels less like a building and more like an amplifier. It takes whatever a team is and cranks it up to 10. You have one group that wants to turn this thing into a track meet, raining threes and feeding off 18,000 people in red, and another that quietly enjoys walking into your gym and ruining your mood with defense and glasswork. Both sides come in with matching 10-3 records and top 20 rankings, but they wear it very differently. Arkansas selling fireworks and Tennessee selling control, which is why this number sitting around a tiny 1.5-point edge to the home team is so interesting. Here is the thing. When a team is unbeaten at home, scoring in the 90s on average and playing at one of the faster tempos in the country, the natural instinct is to assume the roof and the rims belong to them. Arkansas fits that billing. They have already cracked 100 points 4 different times, and they just walked off the floor from a 103-74 win where they hit 15 threes and shot almost 55% from the field, which is exactly the kind of performance that sticks in bettors' minds. But style and comfort are not the same as reliability. Tennessee comes in with an 83.9 points per game offense and a defense that is flat-out stingy, holding opponents to just 63.7 per night and under 38% from the field, numbers that speak to a team that travels well because defense and rebounding tend to show up in any gym. You can see that profile in their non-conference arc. They have already dealt with a real schedule. They took out Houston on a neutral floor, pushed Kansas, handled Louisville, and then rolled into the holidays smashing South Carolina State by 51 while winning the boards by 36 and owning the paint. Arkansas has its own resume. They posted a blowout of James Madison. They beat Texas Tech and Louisville, and all 3 of their losses came against ranked opponents, so this is not some paper tiger home bully. Honestly, this looks less like a favorite versus underdog matchup and more like a neutral court coin flip that happens to be dropped in Fayetteville, and the market has basically admitted that by keeping the spread so short. Here is where the personality of these two teams really starts to matter. Tennessee's identity still starts with defense. They are top tier nationally in points allowed. They clean the defensive glass, and they run you off the three-point line well enough that opponents have to live with tough twos. That kind of profile tends to keep them attached in hostile environments, even when the other team makes the first run, because they do not need to shoot the lights out to hang around. And this particular Tennessee group is not one of those grind-only versions. The ball movement is sharper, the shot quality is higher, and they are finishing at nearly 49% from the field on the season, which lets them answer those crowd-fueled spurts instead of just trying to survive them. On the Arkansas side, the selling point is obvious. They score in bunches. They are comfortable playing at a 74-75 possession pace, and the home environment gives their shooters permission to let it fly early and often. The flip side is that their defense has been much more generous, giving up almost 75 a night, and those extended runs they go on can be matched by extended stretches where they are trading buckets instead of getting stops. That is exactly the sort of volatility that a disciplined, top 15 style defense can punish over 40 minutes, especially one that has already shown it can handle athletic, aggressive offenses and still close games. In terms of personnel health, there is one clear thing we know and one thing we do not. For Tennessee, junior forward Cade Phillips is confirmed out for the season after shoulder surgery, which tightens their front court rotation a bit but has already been baked into how they are playing in late December. For Arkansas, their main perimeter engines and primary bigs on the current roster, the guys driving this offense, are all listed as active and have been playing heavy minutes through the end of non-conference, with only short-term issues like Trevon Brazil's back spasms popping up for a single November game. Nothing in the most recent coverage suggests a fresh, late-breaking injury to any of the core creators on either side, so from a handicapping angle we are dealing with what amounts to best on best, aside from that one known Tennessee absence. When you put it all together, you have a tiny home spread, an Arkansas team that is explosive but loose defensively, a Tennessee team with the cleaner underlying efficiency numbers, and a matchup that has the feel of a 1 or 2 possession game either way rather than a true home court blowout spot. Any lean toward the visitor here is, of course, predictive and speculative because we are talking about a single game with a lot of talent on both benches, but the statistical profile and recent form both tilt toward the orange side being more trustworthy in a tight whistle. As our first pick for this matchup, the Tennessee to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. On paper, this is one of those matchups that analytics people and casual fans actually agree on. There should be points, and plenty of them. Arkansas is sitting at 90.5 per game, Tennessee at 83.9, and both are doing it with real efficiency, connecting on just over 49% of their shots from the field. One team plays fast and loose, the other plays organized and confident, and when those two mindsets share a floor, the tempo usually ends up somewhere in the middle, but the scoring tends to stay high. Bud Walton is not exactly a place where offenses shrink. If anything, the building invites quick threes, early clock drives, and long runouts after misses. Arkansas is running around 74.7 possessions per game, which puts them on the higher end nationally, and they are not shy about firing from deep, as James Madison just learned when the Razorbacks drilled 15 threes in a single night. They have cashed overs in 5 of their last 6, and that is not an accident. The combination of pace, three-point volume, and a defense that is more average than elite creates a very friendly environment for high totals. Tennessee, on the other hand, used to be the classic under team, slower, defensive, and content to play 58 to 54 rock fights. This season looks different. They are still clamped tight on the defensive end, but the offense has taken a serious step with efficient shot selection, strong inside finishing, and enough three-point shooting to punish any defense that overhelps. Look at the recent stretch. They put up 91 on Rice, 89 on Tennessee State, 85 on Rutgers, 76 on Houston, and 105 on South Carolina State. And even in their lower scoring games against Syracuse and Illinois, the shot quality was good enough that a few more makes would have changed the total result. There is also a rhythm element here that matters more than people think. Both teams are coming into conference play on the back of statement offensive outings. Arkansas with that 103 against James Madison, and Tennessee with that 105 in Knoxville. Players are human. They remember the feeling of everything going in. The coaching staff see how comfortable the rotations looked with the current spacing, and it becomes very hard to slam on the brakes the very next game, especially when the opponent can also score. Add in the typical Southeastern Conference officiating in a high-profile matchup, where you often see a fairly tight whistle early, and you have two aggressive offenses living at the free throw line, quietly pushing the total up with the clock stopped. If you try to build a mental picture of how this game most likely flows, it looks something like this. Arkansas rides the crowd and plays fast from the jump. Tennessee maybe absorbs the first punch but answers with efficient half-court sets. And by the middle of the second half, you have a game where both teams are living in the high 70s or low 80s, and one late run decides the winner. From a numbers standpoint, the posted total is sitting right around 152.5 to 153.5, which essentially asks you whether these two are more likely to land in the mid-140s or push toward the high 150s. Given the scoring profiles, tempo indicators, and recent form we just walked through, leaning toward the higher range is a projection, not a guarantee, but it is one that lines up cleanly with what both teams have been all non-conference. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Purdue versus Wisconsin. This matchup in Madison feels like one of those classic winter Big Ten nights where everyone in the arena knows exactly what is coming, and the real question is whether Wisconsin can handle that sustained pressure for a full 40 minutes. Purdue has been playing like a well-tuned machine so far, sitting at 12-1, piling up wins with an average of about 86 points scored and only 66 allowed, which gives them a massive scoring margin of just over 20 per game. They are not just sneaking by teams, they are flattening them, and that matters when you are talking about covering a number on the road rather than simply escaping with a win. You look at how they closed out non-conference play, hanging a 100-60 win on Kent State, and it fits the pattern. When they smell blood, they do not just ease off and dribble out the clock. They keep stacking stops and turning clean possessions into comfortable separation. Wisconsin, to be fair, brings real resistance here. They are 9-4 overall, a perfect 8-0 at home, and they score about 83.5 points per game while allowing a bit over 73, so they are used to playing from in front in their own building and used to seeing the ball go through the net in front of that crowd. They have already smacked Marquette by 20 in Madison and just handled Milwaukee by 20 as well, so they are not scared of the moment or the lights, and the Kohl Center can feel like a long, loud night for whoever walks in wearing different colors. The tricky part with this Wisconsin team is the range of outcomes. On their best days, they look dangerous, but we have also seen the other side, like that 90-60 collapse at Nebraska or the neutral site loss to Villanova, where the game tightened up and suddenly they were the ones chasing all the small details. That tells you something about their floor against the very top tier. When the physicality ramps up and nothing is easy, their offense can stall just enough for things to slide from this is close into this is getting away from them pretty quickly. Purdue, on the other hand, plays the kind of grown man basketball that punishes that inconsistency. They lean on you possession after possession, stay patient, and trust that over time their shot quality, their board work, and their defensive discipline will carve out a gap. It is not always flashy, but it is relentless, and that style tends to travel even into a loud, packed Big Ten building. So when the market is asking them to win this game by multiple possessions on the road, it is not some tiny hurdle, but the way these two teams have been trending. The difference in consistency, physicality, and margin profile makes that number feel more like a natural extension of who Purdue is right now than some wild stretch. As our first pick for this matchup, the Purdue Boilermakers to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. On the surface, you see two teams that can absolutely score, and you might be tempted to think fireworks and trading buckets all night. Purdue averages in the mid-80s, Wisconsin sits in the low 80s, and both can string together offensive spurts where it feels like every trip produces a clean look. That is the fun story. The less glamorous piece is how those points actually get built, and what happens when the game tightens in conference play. Purdue's scoring comes packaged inside a pretty controlled style. They are comfortable grinding through half-court possessions, living through longer sets, and trusting that their structure will eventually create something high value near the rim or a clean outside look. That sort of approach tends to shave a few possessions off, especially once they get a lead and are happy to make the opponent guard for 20 seconds at a time instead of racing up and down. You know how some games feel like a sprint from the opening tip? This one has a good chance to feel more like a tug of war, with both sides trying to impose their preferred rhythm rather than just letting it turn into open gym. Wisconsin adds a bit of chaos because they are more willing to play at a quicker clip, and their home games have had stretches where the pace and the energy spike. But their most revealing nights against high-level opponents paint a slightly different picture. In that 90-60 loss at Nebraska, the moment the shots stopped falling and the defense in front of them tightened, the game slowed into something much more one-sided and much less free-flowing, with Wisconsin stuck trying to manufacture tough looks late in the clock. Against Villanova on the neutral floor, they needed overtime just to reach 66, and that was with some extra possessions thrown in. And those are the types of environments that look a lot like what Purdue brings: physical defense, deliberate offense, and a willingness to squeeze the tempo when it suits them. So when you see a projected total sitting in the low 150s, it is really the book asking, are you sure this turns into a full-on shootout when both teams know what is at stake, rather than simply pricing in their raw scoring averages? In a non-conference setting or a random November bye game, that kind of number might get cleared with room to spare, but this does not look like that kind of spot. Conference game, prime time, a disciplined road favorite that is perfectly happy to manage pace, and a home team that has already shown its scoring can dip when the defense climbs a level. All of that leans toward a game where big runs happen, but the overall scoring never quite turns into a track meet. You can very easily imagine this turning into one of those nights where every possession in the second half feels heavy, the coaches milk timeouts, the whistles slow things down in short bursts, and the final score lands in a range that feels competitive and intense, but just a bit lighter on raw points than the number suggests. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.